So the first lesson is about rectangular coordinates. First thing you should know is how to plot a point on a Cartesian plane. Cartesian plane is simply this fourth quadrant that you know. You should know that these quadrants, you name them quadrant 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, you should remember that. Then you should be able to plot points given the coordinates. For instance, point A is at -1, 2. So at -1, +2, I can put a point, draw my point, and I need to make sure I label it. That's A. B is at 3, 4. C is at 0, 0. This is what we also call the origin. So just know that verbiage. If you hear origin, that's what we're talking about. D is at -2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So here's point D. Hopefully that is all reviewed for you and you should have no problem with that. Now, naming the quadrants where x times y is greater than 0. What you need to think about there is the signs of your x and y coordinates. Okay, so let's just review this. Over here in quadrant 1, your x's are positive, your y's are positive. In quadrant 2, your x's are negative and your y's are positive. Quadrant 3, x's are negative, y's are negative. And in quadrant 4, your x's are back to positive and the y's are negative. So you will occasionally have a question like this. Name the quadrant or quadrants where the product of x times y is greater than 0. That means it's positive. Okay, so you and I know that in order to multiply two numbers and get a positive product, the sign of those two numbers needs to be identical, either both positive or both negative. So we look back at our Cartesian plane and decide where are the x and the y signs identical. Well, in quadrant 1 they're both positive, so that's one of my answers. And in quadrant 3 they're both negative. If you multiply two negatives together you get a positive answer, which fits this criteria. So my answer is quadrant 1 and quadrant 3. Why does that say 2? That should be a 3. Sorry. Okay. Moving on. The next part of your notes is about the distance formula. And you should recall the distance formula from earlier years. It is this formula here, large square root. It's the difference of your x values squared plus the difference of the y value squared. And then you take the square root of that. This formula, if you recall, came from Pythagorean theorem. Which was a squared plus b squared equals c squared. You should recall that. That's where this comes from. Now, coming down to this example, I'm not just going to ask you the distance between 2 points, but for you to tell me, does it form a right triangle? How do you know if it forms a right triangle? Well, you know it because then the 3 lengths will satisfy the Pythagorean theorem. So first of all, I have to come up with the first distance, and that's between the first 2 points. I'm just going to label x1, y1, x2, y2, just to help me know what to plug in and where. So it's the square root of x2 is 4 minus x1, which is 2, squared, plus y2, which is 0 minus 1, squared. Do the math. Okay? 4 minus 2 is 2. If I square it, I get a 4. Plus -1, or 0 minus -1 is -1. If I square that, I get a positive 1. 4 plus 1 is 5, so my answer is the square root of 5. That's not a perfect square, so I'm going to leave it be. Now, distance 2. I'm going to take the second point and the third point and do the same thing. This is the second and this is the first. Okay? Subtract the y, or the x's, I'm sorry. 5 minus 4 squared plus 7 minus 0 squared. Work it out. 5 minus 4 is 1. If I square it, I get a 1. 7 minus 0 is 7. If I square that, I get a 49. So what I have is a square root of 50. Alright, the third length is between the third point and the first point. Okay, so I'm going to just do the same process. 5 minus 2 squared plus 7 minus 1 squared. Okay, 5 minus 2 is 3. Square that, you get a 9. 7 minus 1 is 6. Square that, you get a 36. So 9 plus 36 is 45. So I have that. Now, what do you do with this? Remember, we are trying to get this to fit into Pythagorean theorem and make a true mathematical statement. That means it's a right triangle. So to do that, if you remember, Pythagorean theorem C is always the hypotenuse of the longest length of the triangle. So you look at your three lengths. Which one's the longest? Well, this one's the longest. And then the others, doesn't matter which is which. We'll just make one A and one B. So what I'm going to do is plug it in and see if that works. Okay, A squared plus B squared. Does it equal, sorry, square root of 50 squared. Alright, let's work it out. Remember, when you square a square root, whatever's under the radical just comes out. Square root of 5 times square root of 5 is just 5. Square root of 45 times square root of 45 is 45. Square root of 50 times square root of 50 is 50. So is 5 plus 45 50? Yes. So what that tells me is, yes, they form a right triangle. And there's my answer. Okay, and here's my proof. All this work right here is the proof of my answer. The last part of our notes is dealing with the midpoint formula. Again, this is review, and you should remember this from geometry, algebra 1 days. To find the midpoint between 2 points on a graph, you simply take the two x values of those points and average them. Add them, divide by 2. Take the two y values, average, divide by 2. So keep in mind your answers on the midpoint formula are always coordinate pairs. An x and a y, because it's a point you could actually plot that would be between your two original points. Okay, so your problems today are going to look similar to this. They are word problems, but we can do this. The annual profit for FedEx in 2002 was $20.6 million. In 2004, it was $24.7 million. Assuming the growth was steady, determine the annual profit in 2003. What does this have to do with midpoint? Well, think of it in terms of an XY table. Okay, 2002, 2003, 2004. We know in 2002 it was $20.6 million. In 2004 it was $24.7. So what we need to do is figure out what is that midpoint between these two profits. The midpoint between 2002 and 2004 is 2003. So to take x1, I'm going to take x1 2002 plus 2004 divided by 2. We know that that's going to be 2003 because we know that's the midpoint. Then I take 20.6 plus 24.7, and then I have to divide by 2. Order of operations says you have to add first. Don't forget your order of operations. So I have 45.3 dividing by 2. I get 22. And 22.65. Okay. Remember, that represents millions of dollars. So any word problems you do in here, we're going to answer in a complete sentence. Doesn't have to be long. Just say the annual profit in 2003 was $22.6 million. And that's all you have to say, but you definitely need to show the work to prove your answer. Okay? Now example 5, that is for you to complete in your notes. It's simply 2 points. Use them in midpoint formula. 2 points, I want to see the work in your notes and the answer completed. In the whisk that you complete, you're going to give me the answer. And remember, that's going to just be a coordinate pair, an x and a y. So, thanks, and we will see you in class.